Okay, it's 6 o'clock. So I'll call to order the meeting, February 16th, 2021. And could we have the roll call, please? Emma?
Director Daniels,
I'm here.
Vice President LeHue,
I am here as well.
Director Jaffe,
Here.
Director Christensen, Director Christensen.
I'm unmuted.
Oh, there you go. Thank you.
Stay here.
And President Lather.
I'm here. Okay, so everybody is here today. We're going to move on to the closed session, but before we do, we have someone that wants to speak from the public.
Ms. Steinbruner?
Hello, this is Becky Steinbruner. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. Good evening. I do want to speak about the two closed item issues, the first being 1.1 and the legal action that I have brought against the district. I did, at the last meeting, I did ask again that there be some opportunity for discussion of a settlement, and I did receive from your counsel an offer, but to be quite honest, I thought it was an insult. It did not at all address any of the problems that I see that have caused me to bring up this litigation. And simply, the offer was that if I agreed to drop everything and not file any new lawsuits, that the district would issue a press release saying that I had saved your ratepayers up to $1 million in expenses. And I'm sorry that it's costing so much. I hope that Ms. Schiller will not follow the practice of flying up and spending the whole day in court here as the new cases move forward. Court call, Zoom conferences are now much accepted, and I'm sorry that Ms. Ouellette really drove up the costs by always flying up and spending the day with any action at all. So I do plan, I have rejected the offer today in an email to Ms. Schiller, and I will move forward aggressively with this action, and I'm sorry to have to do it. I would like still to sit down and try to talk through this, because I think we could come to an agreement, but certainly not what was offered. And I will be curious to see what the closed session reports with the agreement with the county regarding Chanticleer. Thank you.
Thank you.
So at this time, we will take a recess and go to closed session, and we will return after it's over.
Hey, Becca, can you make me the co-host, please?
Already did.
Was it a cat or a baby?
That's my 19-year-old cat. Yeah.
Poor thing.
And I've had neighbors ask if we had a new baby.
And you can tell them we have an old baby.
Yeah.
Let's see, who's here now? 1, 2, they're missing 2. No, we're missing 1. Where is? Director Christensen.
You loser?
Oh, here she comes. Okay, so Director Christensen's here, so we're all here. We will come back to, sorry. Is there any reportable items?
No reportable action, President Lather.
Okay, let's see now. Are there announcements from board members and any requests for pulling items? I guess I'm supposed to start in a certain order, I think.
Yes. I'm first.
First
I
is
have nothing.
first. Then it's Tom.
I don't know what order you've got. I to remove item 4.5 from consent.
Okay, there's a request for 4.5 be removed. Now it's Director Jaffe. Anything? Bruce, you're muted.
4.11.
Okay, item 4.11. Director Christensen.
Well, I don't have any further items. So no.
Okay. Do you have, and also if you have anything to report?
So that's for later, I think.
It is?
Ye-
I'm following my little,
No?
That's
Okay.
This is item, this is item 3.
okay. It's just how it's written. I thought it was 2 things. Okay, then we will move on to the consent agenda and public comment.
Yeah, and President Lather, we're going to correct that. Number 3 is confusing with the word announcement there. So Emma and I'll work on that. Thank you.
Okay,
I
sorry.
move the consent agenda except for 4, 5, and 4.11.
Can we do that before we have public comment?
I think we need to have public comment.
Okay.
Hey, yeah. Public comment, please.
But we'll hold your place.
Hello, this is Becky Steinbruner. Can you hear me?
Yes, Becky, we can.
Hello, thank you, and good evening again to you. I appreciate the 2 directors pulling item 4.5 and 4.11. Thank you. I want to speak about item 4.2, the financial report. I have some questions on page 15. It talks about the water sales. Let me get to that here on my screen. The water sales being, they exponentially increased for the month of April, beginning in April, going up $200,000 worth from the previous month. In May, up an additional $300,000, and I'm curious about why that is projected to be such steep increases in water sales numbers. I also had a question on that same page, number 15. It talks about debt principal and interest payments. There's a $2.5 million debt interest payment for March of 2021. I would appreciate some explanation about that. It looks like a one-time expense for 2021, at least in the next few months. And then the total deficit is $7.6 million. That's a big deficit. So, but in the month of March, it is shown not to be a deficit, and I'm wondering if that is an error. Also, going back up to grants revolving fund for the month of March, it's 6.4 million. The rest of the numbers stay steady throughout,
Ms.
and I'm wondering
Steinbrenner,
if
your
the
time
6
up.
is an error.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so there are no other requests to comment, so we'll bring it back to the board. Director Daniels?
Yes, I'd move the entire consent agenda except for 4.5 and 4.11.
Second,
Roll call. Director Daniels,
Yes,
Vice President LaHue,
yes.
Director Jaffe,
Yes.
Director Christensen,
Yes.
and President Lather.
Yes. Okay, next is the oral and written communications. So I take it we start with public comment first.
Mhm.
Ms. Steinbrenner?
Hello, this is Becky Steinbrenner. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. I'm still kind of in shock that no one even asked any questions about the $6 million number for the month of March alone in the debt. Anyway, moving on with public comment. I note that your website has changed. It used to have website spots where you could click on the video for previous meetings. That's gone. It used to have website spots where you could click on correspondence that was separated from the agenda. That is gone. At least I'm not seeing it when I go to your website and note the new changes. So if you could please instruct the public where to find those pieces of information. The minutes are really they're action minutes essentially, and give no indication of what was said when one public comment was registered. And your board in the past has said that that information is available on the video, but the videos are not available. So I would like some help on behalf of the public where we can find that information on the website that has been changed. And I did submit a letter to your board immediately after your last meeting, clarifying some things. So that correspondence should be shown with this meeting, but it's not in your agenda packet and it's not visible on the website. I am curious about the status of the extended negotiations with the City of Santa Cruz for the surface water transfer agreement. I do understand that that will be coming before the City of Santa Cruz Council in the near future. So I am encouraged that you have continued working with the City of Santa Cruz to extend this good opportunity to make use of extra water when it is available, and really wish that it could be more and encourage you to ask for more. I'm looking forward to the draft EIR that the City of Santa Cruz will be presenting in the near future regarding the water rights expansion. Thank you.
I am muted double. Okay, so thank you, Ms. Steinbruner. Has anybody checked the website? We'll have to do
Can-
that.
President Lather, I can respond on behalf of staff why the website looks different. We're currently transitioning to a new website platform. So temporarily until April, when the new website gets up and running, the board meeting tab is going to look a little bit different. So the same information is still available online. Public members just need to specifically click on the meeting date, and that will take you to a tab with the correspondence and the video, the agenda, and the board packet.
Thank you, Emma. So at this point, Director Daniels, you're first in line if you have any oral or written communications.
Yeah, I was just going to mention, we've gotten a lot more rain since we've met about a month ago, but we are still 42% below normal. That's it. So it's looked like it's going to be quite a dry year.
I saw that on the news too. Director LaHue, Vice President LaHue.
Nothing to add.
Okay. Director Jaffe.
I was going to mention what Bruce mentioned, but one thing I just want to keep on our minds is that there's not a direct correlation between rainfall and recharge. So I like that the district is doing what they can to start thinking in terms of recharge, because if the rain comes slowly, it has one recharge potential. If it comes all at once, it has a different recharge potential. So I just want to keep that on our mind. And Bruce knows more about this than I do. He was going to say something.
He's got his hand up. Okay, Bruce.
Well, actually, the graph is this exponential kind of thing. And it went to zero about 20% down. So if we get 20% less rainfall than normal, we get essentially zero recharge. And so where we're at, means that probably most of everything we've gotten has evaporated away one way or the other.
Okay, that's a happy note, isn't it?
Uh-huh.
Director Christensen, do you have something happy to discuss?
Well, something promising for two congresswomen from Michigan are seeking to have a rider added to the HR1, the COVID relief fund, to provide funds to address water insecurity in the entire country due to the COVID pandemic. And already noted that part of the stress is not only evictions and things like that, it is having water cut off. And they also noted since the pandemic has started across the country, it's not specific to California, water rates have gone up as much as 30% in some communities. And so there is generally, there's a different water use that's stressing water districts. And in general, they're going to try to get that inserted into the, added to this bill to provide some water security to people. Anyway, that's it.
Okay. Then if nobody else has anything to say, we can move on to reports. That would be district council, right?
Yep. Thanks, President Lather. Just a really brief one. Just a reminder that the new legislative cycle at the state level started in January. We're already starting to see some bills of note. One I wanted to make sure the board was aware of is AB 361. It would modify the Brown Act to codify the governor's executive order from last year, which allows us to have these sort of Zoom only type meetings. The bill would largely track the executive orders. So anytime there was a local or state declared emergency or other situation where it was unsafe for health and safety for there to be a physical meeting, local agencies would have the ability of having a Zoom only meeting, provided that they agendize it and provide some way for the public to participate really in the same way we've done it for the past year or so now. we'll keep watching that bill and any others that come up that are of note. Thank you.
Thank you, Josh. Let's see, now we're on to administrative business. There are no conditional or unconditional research will serve letters, so we'll move to 7.2. Consider additions to the finance status report. The presenter is Leslie.
So good evening, everyone. This is an item that that we've had some public input on and that the board has requested be brought back for consideration. And what this is our monthly finance status report, and it is in the packet for January this time. But we're considering whether the optional information presented in the finance status report is still of interest to the board, or if there's other things they would prefer to see. So I just want to start off by saying that we are obligated to provide certain information to the board on either a monthly or quarterly basis. And that's governed by government code. We are required to report the investment fund report, and that's usually the first page of our finance status report, and that includes a status of all of our investments, the maturity dates, where those funds are deposited, the current yield, market balance, etc. And so we are required to bring that information to you on a regular basis. And we're also required to bring some information to you on the operating fund report, and that would be all of our operating funds at Santa Cruz County Bank. And so we provide you an operating and reserve fund report that includes all of our account balances and our receipts and disbursements out of those accounts at Santa Cruz County Bank, as well as our balance and any expenditures out of our operating contingency reserve fund. So those are required items. The other item that is a required item is the cash flow statement, which is usually the last page of your, well, not the last page because we have warrants, but in this packet, it's page 15 of your status report. And what that report is that report is simply showing you that we have the necessary liquidity and cash flow to maintain operations for the next 6 months. So this isn't an exact reporting of what we're going to spend or take in over the next 6 months. It's a forecast. The numbers are based on our annual budget. And when we bring out a new budget in June, these numbers will then be updated to reflect the 6 months moving forward based on the revised budget numbers. So it's nothing more than just a liquidity report that shows to you that we do have the ability to maintain ongoing operations with the funds we expect to come in and the expenditures that we expect to send out based on our 2020-21 budget. We're also required to provide you a warrants report, which we do. That's numerous pages, and that shows all of the warrants that we've issued every month, who they're issued to and the dollar amount and the purpose for the warrant. So those items are all things that we present to you because it's required in government code. But we do provide you some other items that are optional. Right now, we have been providing you a monthly consumption report that shows you both consumption for a given month historically going back to 2004, and then also consumption fiscal year to date that shows historically going back to 2004. We also give you a comparison of how we're doing on our actual water consumption compared to where we thought we would be on the budget. And then most recently, we've added to the report a residential tiered consumption report. And that came about because the board had expressed an interest in Raftellus doing an analysis of whether or not their forecast of 70% of our customers not being impacted by a significantly higher bill was in fact the case. So we did do that analysis. We were able to show that less than, actually 70% or more of our customers are not impacted by more than $5. And so having shown that to you, I don't know if that information is still of interest to you or not. So the question then is, what information might you be interested in? I provided a list of some items that you might consider adding back to the report that used to be on some of our old reports. And I've also provided you some ideas of what you might consider that we haven't reported on before. Now, I do want to point out that we typically have just a short window of time between the end of the monthly close and when a report has to be prepared for a board packet. So we can't get too intricate with our reporting. And the billing software does not always allow for simple data pulls. Sometimes 2 or 3 reports have to be pulled and the information has to be integrated manually. So there is some time that and effort that goes into putting these graphs and information together for you. But some of the information from prior reports that you might be interested in, and I believe one of these things was of interest to Mr. John Cole, the customer who brought the change in the finance report to your attention. You may want to see water consumption billings. And I think if you go down on the agenda item, you'll see some of that. Oh, no, sorry. Up. Sorry to confuse you. Go up just a little bit more. Another page. One more page. There you go. This was information that we used to report back in 2017 before we made the move to the new Tyler software system. We used to report to you the amount we collected in consumption billings each month. We can go back to providing you that information if it's useful to you. We also used to provide it by tier. The main reason for that January 2017 water billings by tier report was not only to show you the different tiers, but to kind of show you the scale a little bit, to show you that the majority of our revenue is definitely collected in tier 1. And that the majority of our revenue is collected from single family residential customers. So that provided just a little bit of context and scale right there, which is why we included that report. So if that's information that's useful to you and you want to consider bringing it back, I'm happy to do so. If you'll go down one page, there was some information we used to provide you. It was the adjusted top tier consumption. This information is not particularly useful anymore because we've made such drastic changes to the top tier. We tried to do it and then note when the threshold changed from, I know in 2017, it changed from 15 units to 13 units. But now that we've gone to 5.99 units and the top tier is anything over 6 units, this comparison doesn't really hold up anymore. It's not useful information. So if you want it, I can provide it, but I don't think it's going to be particularly useful information to you any longer. We have also in the past provided a production versus metered consumption report. That just showed you that we produce slightly more than we sell, which is natural because some of that water is used for other purposes within the district and within the district operations. So that's not particularly surprising, but I'm happy to provide it if it's helpful. So we did talk about potential revisions to the report. I know that Director LaHue at one point had asked for some information that he thought would be useful, and that was actually the number of customers at various consumption levels. We can provide you budget versus actual analysis on either the revenue side or the expenditure side or both. We can provide you, right now we provide you a monthly comparison. So January 2004 all the way to January 2021, or whatever month we're reporting on. If it's more helpful for you to see 13 months of consumption so you can see the seasonal impact, we could provide that as well. We could provide consumption by customer class, a comparison of budget to actual by customer class and tier. There's a lot of different ways we can slice and dice the information. So my question to you would be, first of all, would you like us to bring back any of the reporting that we used to do back in 2017? Or is there something else that would be more useful for us to provide at this point? And so I think at this point, I'm more than happy to open up this item for discussion and to receive some feedback from the board on what you think would be useful information to see on a monthly basis.
Thank you, Leslie. First, we have to see if there's any public comment. Looks like there is, because the timer is up. So let's do it.
Ms. Steinbruner?
Hello, this is Becky Steinbruner. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. I appreciate this thorough analysis of what can be added back in, and very much appreciate that you are trying to respond to John Cole's information and requests also. I have questions on page 169. I think that's a very informative page, and I want to point out that January 2017's water consumption billings were very low. How does that really relate to what's shown on the other side of the graph, fiscal year to date? It's deceptive. It makes it first look like 2017, the amount was very low, and now it's increased by magnitude. So that kind of information is a little confusing. But I want to point out that January billed water consumption was 4.96 over budget. All of the customer rate classes were over budget. And yet at the end it says total water consumption billings to date decreased to 7.38%. So I'm curious about how that information has come to be, and would appreciate an explanation from Ms.
30
Strom.
seconds.
On page 170, I see that there is a graph, the 13-month production versus metered consumption. I think that's good information, and I really would like in future reports to see where that difference in the more water being produced than sold substantially, is that due to leakage? What percent is due to leakage? I think that's all for now, but thank you very much for this report.
Thank you.
I got to state that the items that Ms. Steinbruner was asking about are for the year 2017, and those pages were examples. So it's not really relevant for now, but I appreciate the questions, and we can consider how we're going to present it in the future for the current year. So now we're on to comments by the board, and Mr. Director Daniels is first.
Well, one thing I would like to say is that as far as I'm concerned, I do not need to see any of these optional graphs every single month. You know, and particularly I can understand the effort that the finance group puts in to make them happen. But if I saw them once a quarter or even once every 6 months or something like that, that would probably really give me all the insight I need. And it would save a lot of effort on their part. And I know that right now they've got a lot of stuff on their plate. So I think you know, being a little soft with that is a good thing. One thing I'm not clear about, there was mention of John Cole, and I know that he came to us with one meeting and he had all kinds of things he wanted to see in the reports or not see in the reports. And I don't see any of those here. So I don't know what he wanted and what we'd have to do to get what he wanted and so forth, and whether what he wanted would be any use to the board. So that's not, I can't make that decision now because I don't see what he was asking for.
The information John Cole was interested in is on page 169 of your packet.
69?
So that was information that had been there in 2017.
It was, right, it was information we presented back in 2017.
Well, of course, we can't do that now because we don't have 4 tiers for one thing. So. Anyway.
Was there a specific graph from page 169 or was it all of it?
I think it was all of it.
Okay, well.
It would be simpler because there's only 2 tiers now.
Yeah. Well, once again, I think we've seen some things like that over time, but you know, I don't need to see that every month. It doesn't really do much for me every month. Every once in a while, yeah, because then I can see how we're doing, but I don't need it every month. That's just personally. So I guess that's all for me.
Okay, Vice President LaHue.
Yeah, I think I agree with Bruce's idea that there are some things that are nice to have monthly, but there are some things that are just useful just to see once every quarter or 6 months or even yearly, some of them. And I know that one of the things that I know for me would be valuable is just this analysis of somehow, and Leslie mentioned how many customers don't have their bills go up by more than a certain amount. And I don't know if there's a different way to present that, like what percent of customers have gone up 10%, what percent of customers have gone up 20%. So we kind of get just a feel of how people our customers are impacted, because that affects our decisions as we look at our next rate assessment and analysis that will come up within the next year or two. So that's the only thing, that's the only thing I would like to just see, make sure there's something useful to give us an idea of how our customers are impacted price-wise, like what percentage of them. Because if you hear
the report that we have been providing you shows you that in the summertime, about 70% of your customers are in tier 1. In the wintertime, you've got about 81% of your customers in tier 1. People in tier 1 are seeing less than a $5 impact on their bills. Now, when you get to the second tier, it's really hard to determine how much customers are seeing their bills increase because their water use isn't consistent from year to year. Like for 1 year, a customer may see their bill go up 12%, and the following year, their bill only went up. What are we comparing it to? Are we comparing it to a baseline back in 2013 or 2015? Are we comparing it to the prior year? And then to do that on an individual customer by customer basis, that's where it gets a little bit unwieldy.
So there was a concern about the percentages not quite being reflective, like who's only tier 1 and who goes into tier 2 past tier 1.
It changes from month to month.
Well, but it wasn't really reported that way.
See, what I'd like to see, even if there's something simple to change with the graph, that just like, so I can see what percentage of the customers are just all in tier 1. If that's all we need to say.
Go ahead and go to page, let's see here, what page are we on?
150 has it.
Yeah.
So let me just make sure I'm understanding it correctly.
Yeah, I don't understand it, Leslie.
Okay, so there's 2 graphs there. Go up one more page. There you go. This one is showing you the tiered consumption in units for each tier for each month.
Yeah.
And you can see that you had 60, in January, you had 67,849 units consumed in tier 1, which was 88% of our consumption. And 9,138 units were consumed in tier 2, which was only 12% of our consumption.
That makes
So you-
perfect sense to me, but the next graph does not make any sense.
Okay, so then when you go down to the next graph, this is showing you the number of customers consuming water in each tier. So this is where I know that people struggle a little bit with this. You can't consume tier 2 water until you've consumed tier 1 water.
Right.
So we had
What I wanna know-
13,564 customers who consumed water in tier 1. And of those 13,564 customers, 3,212 of them also consumed water in tier 2.
And let me be clear, when we, the vernacular, when we use the word customer, we're talking about connection.
Connection,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah,
Right.
Or an account,
Count, thank you.
It's an account
customer
level, yeah.
account.
So we have that many accounts.
So can we just add a row that subtracts the other from the other and say, this is what percent of our customers only stayed in tier 1 and didn't go into tier 2?
Because those are the ones that are getting the $5 difference.
Yeah, right. So that would be basically, it'd be like 10,352.
And this adds up to 100%, but
And
that's not really the total number of customers.
the percentages are what are misleading. It doesn't work.
They don't make
Okay.
sense.
so
I wanna know what-
I can change that. I can change that. However, we do lose our comparison to the work that Raftellus does, because that's
it-
not the way Raftellus computed it. So as long as you're not trying to compare those numbers back to what Raftellus reported, then I can give you that comparison.
Right. I'd
Does that
rather
make
just,
sense?
I personally would rather just see how many customers, what percent of our customers stayed in tier 1.
Okay.
And then you can find out.
And
100
that
minus
would be,
that is how many
that
in
would
tier
be the
2.
13,564 minus 3,212.
I'm saying 10,000, 352, whatever it is. So,
Right.
but then what percent that is of our total connections, just so you see easily percent. I mean, I can
Okay.
calculate, but I mean, it'd be easy to do.
Okay,
concur,
and
that
so
would
I'm
be-
happy to change that. I can definitely do that. I just want to make sure from a public perception that they're not taking that information and comparing it back to the rate study that Raftellus did and saying, okay, now the rate study was wrong.
I think there were
Okay.
two different things going on, Leslie. One is the comparison to Raftellus,
Right.
and the other is just getting an assessment of how many people are in different tiers.
Okay.
If you want,
You
if
could
wanna
also
do a
just
separate-
asterisk it too, just say this is a separate calculation and, it's not
Yeah,
it's not extendable
Or
to.
just make a separate graph that just shows purely percent of customers in tier 1.
the thing
only.
that's important to me. I'm sorry, Tom. Am I?
Yeah, I mean, you're probably going to say what I am. I want to know how many people are really being affected
Yeah.
by tier 2
So-
rates.
So if
Okay.
you look at July, you have a 31% are in tier 2, and that's not true. It's 6,115 divided by 13,476. So it's 45% instead of 31%.
Okay.
But it's like, how far in tier 2 did you go? Like I went 1.
I guess that's true.
I mean,
Right.
my bill was higher than usual, but I didn't go that far into tier 2. It's just, it was a little bit.
I think the most useful thing for the red stuff would be a histogram of how far into tier 2 they were. Were you
Yeah.
1 unit into tier 2, 2 units, 4 units, 5, 12 units? I mean, that's a big difference.
Okay.
Or another way is
Oh, that's
how much
actually,
of their cost was tier 2 water? Because there's a
But like-
cost for just hooking up, and there's a cost for tier 1. And so are there, what percentage of their cost was tier 2 water?
That might be hard, but
I'm
But-
sure.
Well,
it is.
yeah.
I'll mess
So-
around with it and see what I can do.
But I think it's, I haven't heard from Carla yet, but I think we're all asking for the same thing. We want to know how many customers are affected by our rate structure. And I do agree with Director Daniels that this doesn't have to be a monthly thing. As a
Okay.
matter of fact, you know, where it's most important is when we have to make our decisions on the next rate structure.
Now, another question I have of you, because there is a lot of questions right now around affordability and how our customers are doing under COVID. Would our collection activity be of any use to you? Or a comparison of the number of late payments over time? I'm happy to provide that information because we do collect those metrics. So if that's useful to you, I can provide you a snapshot of how many customers are being impacted by late payments and how many customers have signed up for a payment arrangement, any of that kind of information of any use to you.
I think it would be.
Maybe
I mean,
there,
it's really a question of the impact on them of COVID.
maybe there should just be a report that looks at that, you know, the impact on,
Just a one-time snapshot, just,
Yeah.
okay.
and
Or-
that could include the tier 1 and tier 2.
I was going to suggest just two seasonal analyses on the tier 1 that creep into tier 2 phenomenon, because I just noticed on my gas and electric bill that the opposite occurs. In the winter, heat, gas and electricity costs go up, and I'm in tier 2, just, you know, sometimes just one unit beyond that. So I'm suspecting that the same thing, well, we know that, we don't suspect that. The same thing happens with water, since we don't measure explicitly outdoor use, which dramatically increases in the summertime. But it would be interesting to see, I think customers might see an illumination too, like how many of the customers are, you know, this tier 2 cost effect is due to watering, you know.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people would be informed by that. And I don't think it would pay to do it every month. It might be depressing, but
Yeah.
but
Actually,
a
summary.
seasonal illumination would be really kind of helpful, probably.
Okay.
Vice President LaHue?
Yeah, I was just kind of thinking, somebody had mentioned a histogram, maybe one of the Bruces did, and I was thinking if we're looking at percentage of total customers, like if you had a histogram where you said 1 bar for customers that were all in tier 1, the next bar would represent those that went between 1 and 5 units into tier 2, the next bar into up to 10, 5 to 10, you know, so you kind of, it would show 100% of the customers with all these graphs, but it would just, you might get an idea, a better idea, like as Rochelle was saying, you know, you go into, it's a different impact on people if they're only going into tier 2 by 1 unit versus people that go way over. But I don't know, just an idea. At least if I know how many are in tier 1, I'm happy. And I think that every 6 months maybe is a good time to do the review and do it season, so you can look at each season. So
Yeah, that's a good idea that Carla had.
Yeah.
Anybody else?
And in preparation for the rate study, just to let you know what I'm thinking of, is I do want to see the histograms. I do want to see the more detail for that.
Yeah, and we did
I'm
that.
happy with the 6 months or whatever for this type of information.
We did that last time we did rates. I did histograms for January and July of each year. So you could see seasonally what was happening for each
Okay.
customer class.
In fact, I would like to thank Leslie right now that when we were doing the rate study, we had about 20 different rates we came up out of the blue, and she ran off and did all kinds of things. And one thing to think about is, you know, what statistic would you like to see to cover all these different kinds of rates? Like there are rates like we have now about accounts, and then we've also talked about doing per person kind of rates. And so, the kind of things you'd like to have to be able to compare those, it's hard to even guess. So that's almost makes your head explode, but that's the truth.
I would like to leave it open for Leslie to, if there's things that she thinks we should know about, not necessarily have it be standardized, to add things in. And
Okay.
it sounds like one of the things you think we should know about is the number of people affected by COVID. So that wouldn't have to be an every month thing, but just kind of a snapshot and saying, you should be aware of this is what's going on. And that could affect your decisions.
Okay.
Is
So I'm
this-
hearing a lot of interest in information regarding water use, especially those customers impacted by tier 2, and whether they're impacted significantly or just a little bit by tier 2, based on seasonality as well. So some histograms, I'm assuming, by customer class. Do you want that broken out by multifamily, single family type of thing, or do you want just residential?
I think it's probably good to break it out.
Okay.
Yeah, I was interested in the the SFR and the multifamily and the single family.
Mhm.
That was
Okay.
on my list.
And then that's another thing to consider too. And when I present it to you, I can explain it as well. It's interesting because multifamily takes, say 10 households, and because we don't separately meter those, their water use is amalgamated. So it would be like taking 10 single family residential customers and lumping them all together. And they may or may not, you may have 1 or 2 customers in that 10 customer bucket that exceed tier 1, but because you're looking at 10 customers, they stay in tier 1,
and
right?
But they're all evenly assessed because it's an apartment and they're not.
Right, because we don't separately meter, they're amalgamated. And so it's hard. I know that there's going to be a tendency to compare the impact of tiers on multifamily customers versus single family customers, but it's difficult to do because of the way they're grouped, I guess is what I'm saying. And we can have longer discussions about that when we get to those reports.
We probably should definitely compare single family to single family. Because multifamily don't necessarily have the summer increase in usage, right?
Yeah, they do. They do.
Oh, okay.
But what Leslie said, it was really important. It took me a time or two to understand that. I think you guys are a little sharper, but what she's saying is, 7 out of 10 people are in tier 1, right? And so if you average those 7 with the 3 that are in tier 2, you're probably going to come out in tier 1. It's the same thing with the multifamily kind of situation. It brings the multifamily average down into tier 1 because it's all average because most people use in the lower tier.
Well, the total amount used is going to already average it out because the count, maybe it's for 20 units and 12 out of 20 people are really good conserving people. And then there's 8 that aren't. But when you get the bill, it's based on all 20.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And that would be the same customer use profile that you might see in 20 single family residential customers, were they all to be billed in a single lump like that. So, you get to looking at that and you're thinking, okay, well, the water use profiles of the 20 multifamily households are very different from the water use profiles of the 20 single family residential households. That's not necessarily the case. Both of those groups of 20 may have 12 people in tier 1 and 8 people exceeding tier 1 into tier 2. But because the multifamily is on a group meter and is billed without submetering and is just billed as a group meter, it pulls the average down and keeps them in tier 1, even though their use profile would be identical to the 20 single family residential customers. Does that make sense?
Well, it does to me, but I've done this before.
Okay. And
I think-
that's kind of where we get in trouble with Mr. Cole from a comparison perspective.
Another factor about the multifamily units is that some of them may be vacation apartments, in which case, in wintertime, they don't use any water at all. They only use water in summer when they're actually over here having parties and so forth. And so that's another factor, is that that pulls it down, in the wintertime amazingly.
And so
Okay.
I hope, Leslie, you've gotten the idea that all of us want you to balance your workload with you and your staff. And we want information, but it doesn't have to be so frequent that it's kind of dragging you all down. So
Okay.
just
Now, how
you-
often would you prefer this? Quarterly or every 6 months?
We were talking about 6 months. Is that right?
Fine with
Let's
me.
see if that's enough.
I think it's worth trying that. We're in winter now, so we could do the first
Okay.
one really soon, and then next one will be in the middle of summer. So
Okay,
Or
we
the
can do
fall?
that. Okay, so I guess if we go down further then into this board action, I guess I'm asking you, are there any of those optional items or non-statutory items that you want removed from the finance status report that we currently show? And it sounds to me like you're still getting value from this tiered analysis. We just want to make some changes to the way we're presenting the tiered customer count.
Correct.
Correct? Okay, so we're going to keep that information. And then I think you've already given me direction on what you would like added to the report. And we're going to go to an every 6-month format. Now, just out of curiosity, because this was a request of Mr. Cole's, what about page 169? Is that something we're trying to add back at this point?
Can we see that?
oh, it's the
It's that stacked tier.
with revenue.
With revenue.
I mean, should we see how it looks with the current tiers?
You want to try it on a 6-month basis with the other information?
Yes.
Okay. I can do that.
And that keeps everybody happy.
Lisa,
So to clarify, when we say 6 months, it'd be a report every 6 months, but it might not be averaging those 6 months. Whatever is appropriate, Leslie.
Would you like those 6 months broken out? February?
yeah,
or-
as
Yeah.
monthly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. I can do that.
Let's
And so
say-
once we do that, I'll go ahead and take some time to get this put together, and we'll get it to you just as soon as we can. And I will let you know at that time if I'm entering information on a monthly basis anyway. To present the information more frequently may not be that time consuming,
Okay.
right? Because I'm going to have to pull information monthly and put it into a spreadsheet anyway. So
I
I'll
think
let
what
you
we're
know,
saying is
I'll let
that's
you know
your,
what the impact of that is.
I think what we're saying is that's up to you. We
Okay.
only require every 6 months.
Okay. All righty, I can get this
Do we
information.
have to make a motion or,
Direction's okay.
okay. I know it said motion, but I was not sure
Yeah.
why.
How to
And-
speak on that.
And thank you, Leslie. You probably never dreamed how valuable the data that you were presenting would be to our decisions, but it's very valuable.
Well,
Well,
we're
I'm
all-
happy to provide what's useful.
We're a bunch of numbers nerds, all of us. Maybe not Carla.
The one thing we haven't seen, which I found the most interesting to me, we once did a histogram of water usage, and it was something like 15% of our residents don't use any water because they're vacation homes. That was surprising as hell to me.
And it would be interesting to see how that has changed over time now that more people are working remotely. I'm hearing that areas such as ours and Lake Tahoe have much more people in residence than they normally do off season because they
Right.
can now work from wherever they want.
Right.
Yes, it's also true with Carmel and Monterey County.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Okay, so if we don't need a motion and we've given you direction, let's move on to the next agenda item, which is 7.3, property negotiations with the County of Santa Cruz for 2505 Chanticleer Avenue. And the presenter is going to be Ron and Tosh.
Yeah. Hi, board. I will start and Ron can supplement as needed. Ron and I have been working with the county negotiators. It's an interesting situation. It's an RTC project, Regional Transportation Project. This is for the pedestrian overcrossing at Chanticleer that goes over the freeway. The county is the easement. They're tasked with obtaining the easement, and then Caltrans will build it. So there's three entities. We've been primarily working with the county real property division, and we're really close to finalizing negotiations, but we're not quite there to present an agreement for you to consider tonight. What we'd like to do is ask the president and vice president, ask the board to authorize the president and vice president to work with Ron and I over the next week and a half or so as we likely resolve any minor issues that we're still trying to resolve with. They're in a time crunch due to a grant for the project, for their project. And so both agencies are kind of up against the clock with grant funding. And so we'd like to not delay and push towards the next board meeting. And so if we can get the board to delegate that authority to the president, vice president, we would like to do that.
I'll make
Great.
that motion.
Public comment first.
Oh, there's a public comment. That's right.
Hey guys, I got to unmute myself. You're too fast. Public comment first.
Ms. Steinbruner?
Hello, this is Becky Steinbruner. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. I would prefer that this not be approved because it will remove the price and the terms of the agreement from the public's eye. This is going to be a substantial transaction. I would prefer that the board hold a special meeting as soon as the terms are agreed upon with the county's staff and make this transaction public and transparent. So I request respectfully that you not delegate this to the president, vice president for agreements made behind closed doors, but in the keeping of transparency with the public, that the board call a special meeting and that it be noticed. Thank you.
Okay, so we're back to board discussion.
And President Lather, I'll just say, I think Taj did an excellent job. And of course, whatever agreements are reached can be brought back and we'll, to the entire board if that's desired, and certainly are as subject to public review.
The next meeting is in 2 weeks after all. So we're trying, there's some time constraints, and I think negotiations don't need to be at the board level, do they?
No, we think if the board can authorize, sorry, President Lather, the board president and the vice president, delegating your authority to them to ensure that they're comfortable, we think that's more than sufficient.
And my experience has been that staff work on negotiations and then they bring it to the board. It's not negotiated publicly. It's, negotiations are negotiations, and then it's brought to the board. But I've seen it where it's retroactive, the board president and maybe vice president work on it and agree to it. And then we bring it back to the board to present it retroactively. But Josh could probably verify that.
Oh, we could President Lather, we could certainly set it up that way, so that the motion would be to allow the president, vice president to move forward with staff. And then we could bring whatever agreements reached back and maybe put it on consent if the board would be comfortable with something like that, just to clarify that the board's comfortable with the deal that's been struck.
Yeah, let me be clear. Would that come back, Josh? Are you thinking it's just a FYI versus
Yes.
final approval? Okay.
Yeah, and the reason for that is we do want to be able to move forward with the transaction.
Thank you.
I think it needs to be done that way, because if we had even the slightest, tiniest change, we'd have to go all the way around the loop again and negotiate that small, tiny change. And the time is of the essence here. So I think it needs to be that the president and vice president actually, agree to the deal.
And just one further note on that, the Brown Act actually does allow us to give this authority to staff in closed session, but Mr. Duncan and I do feel that transparency is important in these real property issues. So it's something we did want the board to approve in an open session, even just this delegation of authority.
So I have a question. Am I unmuted?
You're unmuted, Director Jaffe.
Yeah. Anyway, so let's say the president and vice president decide to, not that this is going to happen, but theoretical. Let's say they say, we'll give them $10 million for some reason. And then do we then have the ability to, when it comes back, to go, no, you guys can't do that?
Well, you could give us a limit.
Yes, Director Jaffe, if we would want that clarified in the motion, and if that was the board's pleasure, we could be a limit or a minimum that you would provide the authority of the president and vice president to approve.
But once it's approved by them,
if the board approves the motion, once it's approved by them, we can move forward with closing the transaction, and it will come back to the board as an FYI. It would not come back to the board for for final approval. If the board's not comfortable with that, we can try to schedule a special meeting if something is especially time sensitive, if that's the board's pleasure.
Okay.
Or another solution, if that's your concern, is to delegate the authority. However, if the board president or vice president, again, this is a certain level of trust, feel that it should or uneasy at all, then to schedule a special meeting.
I like that, Ron. I like that.
It leaves some discretion still, but good judgment, so to speak, upon good judgment.
Which always, they're always able to do that, but just to make it very clear that that's the process, is if they're uncomfortable to schedule that meeting.
Yeah, because it doesn't sound like it would be very easy to identify constraints or limitations to their authority at this point in the negotiations. It would seem to, because the negotiations are all over the board on the
right,
on what is being discussed.
And since this is an agreement where they give us money rather than us giving them money, it's not like we have a lot to lose. And I'm sure that our president and vice president would try and get as much money as possible and not give it away. So I feel very comfortable with it.
So if you want, let me know, and I can try to reframe a motion if you want, taking what Taj said and just building upon it, what the board said, and just give me the signal and I'll try that.
I'm comfortable with that.
Want me to give a shot at a motion, Rochelle? Okay.
Yes.
So the board appoint and authorize the president and vice president to work with staff to reach a negotiated agreement with the other negotiators, i.e. county and RTC and that bunch. And if the board president or the vice president, so it's not an and, or either one of them are uncomfortable that they request that it be brought back to the entire board either in a special meeting or at the next upcoming meeting. Did I capture that right? Okay.
Yes, you did.
Yeah.
That's good.
So is there a motion?
I will make the motion that we do that.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Can we take a roll call, please?
Director Daniels,
Yes, please.
Vice President LaHue,
Yes.
Director Jaffe,
Yes.
Director Christensen,
Yes.
and President Lather.
Yes. Okay, so now we had pulled 2 items from consent. What were
4.4
they?
and 4.11.
4.5 is the first.
4.5 and
4.5, okay.
Mhm.
Yeah, and this is Christine Mead, and I will be discussing this memo. We had to remove the pumping equipment from T. Hopkins well because of a declining yield and increase in the decrease of the drawdown. And it was discovered that there was a couple holes in the column pipes. The pump was basically falling apart, and the motor actually has a lot of hours on it. So we need to get new pumping equipment. And we also did a well video, and there is significant biological growth on the well screens. And our hydrogeological consultant, Montgomery and Associates, reviewed the video and recommends that we do a physical and chemical rehabilitation of the well, and wrote out some specs for that. And I had originally gotten a proposal from Majora Brothers, who pulled the well under our existing blanket contract with them. And they gave us a cost for the physical rehab, and I was waiting for their revised proposal with the cost for the chemical rehab, which I didn't get until this morning. So if you guys hadn't pulled the item, I was going to ask to pull it because I need to revise the allocation from OCR that is proposed to $212,000 because Majora's estimate came out about $23,000 more than I had anticipated. So that's the details that I wanted to bring out that differ from the memo, and I know that at least one of you may have some questions, Vice President LaHue, but
I think we have to do public comment first.
okay.
Ms. Steinbrenner?
Hello, this is Becky Steinbrenner. Can you hear me?
Yes.
ma'am.
Thank you. I have a question about this well, and saw that in 2005 there was arsenic treatment added at the site. And so I wonder why, if the T. Hopkins well is shut down, the Granite Way well also has to be shut down, your newest well. Is it because of the arsenic treatment that the Granite Way well also requires? Or why are they in tandem like this? I also have questions about the high amount of bacterial growth on the well screening. Does that mean that there is nitrate in the water? And is that being explored in terms of the water quality and the impacts of any future treatment? And finally, I just want to say that I am surprised that the Granite Way well, which is related to this well, has been a relatively low producer, or at least not used very much. So I look forward to hearing more about this, and I've been quite surprised by the substantial increase in the cost to rehabilitate the T. Hopkins well. Thank you.
Okay, so now we can go to board discussion. Tom, Director, Vice President LaHue, you had something?
No, I actually just wanted to pull it so that we could hear Christine's modification.
Right. So Christine, what the action would be is to allocate 212,000, is that right, from operating contingency?
Yes, it's 212,000, and that would be 143,000 for Majora and about 42,000 for Montgomery, and then there's also that 15% contingency on top of that. So a total of 212
So that would be the change in the motions.
in motion one. Yes.
Oh, I can't see the other motions. I guess I could go to, I have too many. I needed 4 screens to see everything. Okay, and then the second one is allowing the general to do this without going into bid it based on the emergency need for the well.
Yes.
So Director Daniels, do you have any comments?
I would be ready to approve.
Director Jaffe,
No comments.
Director Christensen,
No comments.
okay, and
Ready for a motion.
is there a
I'll
motion?
second.
I'll move both, the approval of both, the 200 with the modification in number 1 from 186,000 to 212,000 from the OCR.
And Vice President LaHue seconded. So do we have a roll call, please? Or can we have a roll call, please, Emma?
Yes. Director Daniels,
Yes, please.
Vice President LaHue,
Yes.
Director Jaffe,
Yes.
Director Christensen,
Yes.
and President Lather.
Yes. Now we go to, was it
411.
411? Okay. And that was informational. Who's going to discuss this? I guess it's Ron.
Yeah, I just put this on here in case you had any questions. There may be a member of the public that I think wants to make a comment. But primarily, I think if anything caught my eye, I always appreciate the county putting this together every year and kind of gives you a wide picture of what's going on. I think the thing that caught my eye the most was page 140, where it shows overall water production, and you can just see that line steadily increasing. Thank you for bringing that up, Becca. The next graph also is the rainfall. It shows you that, that hasn't been going so well recently. And then the other item is on page 143, coastal water levels. So there's some hope there, but probably will be next one down, impacted if the rain levels, rain amounts don't catch up. So that's it. I'd be glad to answer any questions, but like I said, I know there's a member of the public that I think wanted to speak to the item.
Okay, so we go to public comment. 2 minutes.
Ms. Steinbruner?
Hello, this is Becky Steinbruner. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. I appreciate Mr. Duncan bringing this to the board for examination, and it's a very thorough report. It's done every year. The nice thing about the report this year is that the county's Water Advisory Commission was allowed to look at it before in the draft form Usually it got done at the very last minute and went before the Board of Supervisors and then was given to the Water Commission. So it has, this year, it has the benefit of some very good input by the county's Water Commission. And I want to point out on page 138 that the Pajaro Valley Water Management Agency is doing a lot of conservation efforts, and it's really paying off. They've received some grants to do more water conservation, and they are allocating more of their budget money to conservation. I would like to see this district do that same. I hear a snort. I don't know who said that, but at one point I remember Director Daniels actually trying to decrease the amount of the budget money given to conservation. But it really is the best way to help increase groundwater levels by using less. Your customers are using more. That was shown in your production reports tonight. So I would also like to encourage and point out that the Pajaro Valley Water District has extended the recycled line, purple pipe line, closer and within the district's service area. So I encourage you to make a partnership with them. You have not done so, and I want to encourage you to make a partnership with them to use recycled water, sending it to them for irrigation, and that will help your wells in the seascape area.
Thank you, Becky. So now we'll be back to board discussion. I don't know if there is any discussion.
I was going to mention that the Pajaro area has this regulation that they've installed, which disallows any import or export of water from their region. I know that we were at once trying to see if we could get state water and pass it through the Watsonville area. And they said any water that comes into our area can never leave our area. So the notion of sharing with them just doesn't work.
Yeah, I didn't have that history, so thank you.
And I'd love to have someone show the graph of how conservation has affected our water use since 2003. And our staff has worked really hard with an excellent conservation program over all of these years. So I'm really glad that Pajaro Valley's getting after it. And every water agency should, but I want to just make sure we give credit to our staff who has done a fantastic job.
Yeah,
and our customers.
We've been very preemptive on that. We've done it before it was popular.
Yes.
Are there any other comments, Director Jaffe?
I just wanted to point out on page 143 that there's some lines on there that are from the Groundwater Management Agency. There's the purple line being a 5-year moving average, but there are water levels that are increasing, but there's still these lows that are occurring, and when the lows do occur, seawater intrusion occurs. So it's not it's not something that's reversible easily. There's a hysteresis where when that water comes in during the lows from the ocean, that you then don't just flush it out immediately. It takes a long time.
Yeah, we need to get to the point where those low points are still above the threshold. The green point, the measurable objective. Yeah.
Yeah.
We're not there yet.
Nope.
No, it's under both thresholds. The one you must hit, or we must hit, and the one we'd like to hit to have greater assurity of less seawater intrusion.
Okay. Director Christensen, are you unmuted because you want to talk?
I should be muted, but since my phone keeps going off all the time.
Yeah.
No, I noted the number of connections increasing. I think that highlights the importance to us to analyze exactly what our specific customer use is in wet and dry season. I think it'll help us understand that kind of a thing, because water production is way down despite the increase in the number of connections. And I've heard Rosemary Menard, she mentioned that their water use is decreasing dramatically also, even though they are increasing their number of connections. So somebody's doing something right.
Yeah, I noticed that. I was impressed with that.
Yeah.
Also.
It's difficult to compare us to Pajaro. In Pajaro, 80% of their water use is agriculture. And in our district, it's essentially zero. So our usage and their usage is very different, and conservation is very different. In most of our households, if they get the benefit they want, they don't care how much water they use. In fact, they'd like to use zero water because that would mean zero cost. And in the South, if they need to use more water to get their strawberries to grow, that's the stuff they'll use. And so it's much difficult for them to conserve.
I'd also, the report, it actually was a pretty interesting snapshot of the year, considering the year, most of the year was pandemic and major fire in our county, and there are a lot of major events. And so I think it'll turn out to be kind of a unique year. So all those empty vacation homes, for example, that we previously discussed at the meeting are occupied, at least, in my neighborhood. So it's just, it'll be kind of interesting to see how our financial and water budget analyses pan out compared to previous year and next year when things settle down. So.
President Lather, if I may add, if you could go up 4 graphs, please, Becca. This graph right here, down one more graph, go one page down, right there. Thank you. This graph was included in an article published today by one of the new local news sources. And the essence of it was a customer had written in, like, how can, and you've seen in the editorials, how can we have allow housing with such water shortages? And we hear that question often. I thought the reporter did a good job of reaching out to the agencies, really looking for the data. And so he included this shot and a couple others, I think, from this report. But you heard from the GM at Scotts Valley and the water director down in Santa Cruz, and maybe a couple others, all saying we all have water issues, challenges that are there, whether we, have zero more people, and it just did a nice job of showing that the problem is not growth. And of course, we've had the WDO program. He didn't go into that in that article, but which certainly actually saves water, right? But that capturing the idea that the city of Santa Cruz, unless they want to make 20 or 30% of the people leave, they're going to continue to have drought issues. And of course, we're going to continue to have seawater intrusion, and that, it's been happening since the 80s or before, really, maybe even earlier than that. And I just thought it was well captured, and this graph kind of spawned that. So I just wanted to share that with the board, and it's in the article. And it demonstrates it well, right? Connections versus water production.
I think this was the graph that Director Christensen was talking about.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so is there any more discussion, or this was just an informational item, right?
Yes.
So I can move on to adjournment.
Yay!
Adjourn the meeting.
Good night, everybody.
8 p.m. exactly.
Good night.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Good work.
Thank you.
Good night, everyone.
Night.
Good night.
Carla.
Bye-bye.